Hi everyone, greetings from National Skills Network, popularly known as NSN Hyderabad. And I'm continuing with my talks in relation to skill development and many other aspects which are directly or indirectly connected. Today we are looking at CSR and skill development, and most importantly, we are looking at return on investment, that's ROI in skill development. And we have a guest who's an expert in this field. She has contributed to a recently released report from NASSCOM Foundation, and she is the CEO of Anudeep Foundation. Welcome to this talk, Monisha Banerjee. So Monisha, I'm very glad to reconnect with you for this talk, and I would like to get started by asking you one very basic question. When somebody says, what's in it for me? Why should I invest in skill development? Even though I'm genuinely interested in empowering youth, development, and development of the country, and lot of lofty goals I have, what would you want to tell him or her?
So, well, for one, it's a difficult journey. So it's a very gratifying journey, but you have to. There are going to be obstacles, and it's not one that gives you quick returns in terms of money, certainly. But it's always gratifying, like I said, to see a result at the end of a skilling program. When you see some of these youngsters secure a job or secure a livelihood, that itself is tremendous. So, of course, we at Anudeep is a not-for-profit. So for us, we are working on, the way we measure our ROI is different. So our ROI is completely based on the numbers we impact, right? So how many lives have we touched? That's the metric that we base ourselves on. Of course, it's absolutely important to also remain financially viable. That means we have to be careful about our budgets and ensuring that we're not digging into any other budget and that every project is self-sustainable. So that, I think, is the broader goal. The challenges with CSR, of course, is that, and especially now with so many compliances, there's always a cap on what is known as administrative or overhead expenses. So there is a cap on that, which essentially means that larger companies that have overheads, and when you scale up, you will tend to have those overheads, whether it's technology, whether it's HR or finance, etc. There will be costs attached, and no donor is going to pay you for that. So there's just a flat slab of, for a generous donor, it's 10%. For a not so generous donor, it could be 5%, sometimes even less. So then it's really important to ensure that whatever investments you're making is sort of, the project costs are completely covered. But if your admin costs are not covered or overhead costs are not covered, you have to ensure that there are other sources of revenue. So this is just from the perspective of someone, if he were to say, well, I want to start a skilling company, I'm just trying to sort of highlight what could be the challenges, right? So CSR particularly, if you're looking at just CSR as a source of revenue, it'll only pay you for project costs, direct project costs, not the indirect ones. So there has to be a way in which the entity can figure out what the indirect costs are and how. It could be a student fee, it could be retail individual giving, it could be other sources of funds that one can raise. But it has to sort of come together, unrestricted funding, etc., which helps you as an organization manage your overheads. So I think that is what I would say. It's a difficult journey, gratifying journey. One has to be very, very careful about ensuring that project costs are managed within the budget. So the budgeting part is extremely important, learning to budget correctly, learning to ensure that there are right line items and you make those as granular as possible so that you can cover all the costs, which sometimes you don't see, and ensure that you have all of those budgeted is important.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was a very clear elaboration of the hidden costs, I would say. When somebody gets very motivated and excited about getting into this field, I think they have to be very careful about how the journey is going to be. And I think most importantly in post-COVID times and also the current times, as I would say, sustainability of that enterprise also, becomes a big question mark, right? So now that you have told us about the costs and also the dedication and commitment which is needed from this person to get started. What are the models which are currently existing, Monisha? Like, would you say there is a model like a funded model or a grants-based model or a combination of these two? Can you please help us understand this as well?
Well, for certainly, I mean, in terms of if you just, so there are different sources of funds, right? It could be a institutional grant, and they have a certain treatment of projects in terms of how they want to look at the financing. CSR is again, a different ballgame. So there are outcomes that are very clearly defined for a CSR based model. We have a hybrid model, which means that we do take a small fee from the student, and that's primarily because we believe that there's a better stickiness to the program, there's skin in the game, and we definitely see fewer dropouts than many in the industry, in the sector. So that has worked for us. So we have a fee-based model as well, though it's a very small percent, maybe 5 to 10% of the overall cost of the program. But the remaining part is grant-based. So whatever the source of your fund, I think ultimately the model is really going to be about how you innovate to reduce costs, right? So how are you using technology, for instance? How are you managing your infrastructure costs, for instance? So those are the two big cost items. And then you have costs of personnel or human resources. So I think in terms of models that are emerging for skilling, it's more to do with how are we innovating on the three big cost heads, which is infrastructure, technology, and human resources. So one of the things that COVID has done and has done well is to push us into using technology to do things that we earlier thought wouldn't be possible, right? So at Anudeep, we've always done training in a hybrid model. That means we had a part technology, part in-class instructor-led model. With COVID, the in-class instructor-led piece had to be quickly pivoted to becoming online. So it was self plus live online to make it a complete online model and then we have to think about how does then practicals happen, right? How do practicals happen? And then we figured that instead of having centers exclusively, it's important to have nodal centers in every region where students can just go and use that infrastructure. So common infrastructure. So instead of having, if you have 10 clients or 10 donors, having 10 centers for 10 donors, you could perhaps have 3 or 4 if you're operating in the same region, which you can use as a common infrastructure for all your donors. And, all your students can come there and practice, because what you're doing is taking away the theory part completely online. So you're able to utilize the infrastructure better just for the practicals. So that was a big learning. We, a huge cost or an element for any skilling program is how do you mobilize students? How do you source students? How do you bring students to your programs? Now, earlier, this was a completely on-field activity. So if I look at, say, June 19 data, almost, 86% of our enrollments used to be from offline methods. I would say actually it was a little more, used to be offline methods. Now that itself changed to 86% online method in June of 2020. So we looked at different ways in which we use social media, Facebook live sessions, etc., to bring in students. So I think when we talk about models, whatever be the source of funding, it could be grant-based or CSR, it could be completely fee-based, it could be part fee-based, part grant-based. But at the end of the day, the deliverables are the same. And I think the models are really meant to be able to bring a higher output per rupee of investment, which essentially means you have to learn how to reduce cost. Now, and reducing cost is really looking at how you can leverage technology, leverage shared infrastructure, collaborate with other entities, and be innovative in understanding your audience and understanding the pockets in which they exist, and being able to source, at a more cost-effective manner. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yes, I think there are many elements involved here, which are on the one side, the social side, I would say, and the other side is the business side. So one has to be very wise to combine the social and the business dimension of various courses that you are running, as I understand. So now that you have told us about the models, I would also like you to tell us a bit about uh, when we talk about impact as an outcome, like you said, the outcome is very important. So when we say that we have impacted a certain set of students, or this is the goal for the impact, how would you break it further down into, let's say, tangible and non-tangible return on investment,
Yeah.
or ROI? Maybe you can give us an example
Yeah,
also.
sure. I think for most skilling programs, whether it's a government funded program or a CSR funded program, one tends to look at a success metric through the percentage of people you've placed. So you may have trained 100, but what is the percentage of placement? And typically, nationally, we all look at a 70% plus, right? So 70% of your students have gotten jobs. That's the first metric. And then the second metric, now people are looking at, okay, what's the average salary? How much are these students drawing? And then slightly deeper, you go in and say, okay, how long have they retained in their jobs? 3 months or 6 months from the time of offer. Are they continuing or are they dropouts? Now, this is a very sensible way to approach a skilling program because that's what you can see in the short term. What can you see? You can see, well, whether a student has attended a program well. That means his attendance, he's really been engaged, he's attended the program well. So he has a high percentage of attendance. So that's a good sign of engagement. Then you look at, how many dropouts are there. So if you have a lower dropout, then you know that program's going well. And then at the end of the day, you have an assessment. So you see how many students have cleared your assessments. And then finally, the outcome for most skilling programs is a placement. So, what percentage has been placed. So in the short term or in the cycle of a program that's usually getting funded either by a government or by any other institution, you have a 1 year, 2 year cycle, and you tend to look at these numbers, which is really the practical way of looking at things. But impact is well beyond. If you were to ask me, is that impact? And is that the only way to look at impact? I would want to say that, want to think differently because it's not just about the job or the initial salary. Sometimes we've seen cases where the initial salary may not be that high, but it has resulted in a completely transformed community. And I want to sort of take this example of a certain community in West Bengal where we've been working for about 8 years now, which is a very conservative community. So 8 years back, girls were completely sort of confined to their homes. They rarely moved out beyond a 3-kilometer radius from their homes, certainly were not allowed to work. Now in the same region, we have, more than 1,800 young girls over the last 8 years who've been trained and are working on very non-traditional jobs. So they're working in technology. They're working in, very cutting edge technology, I would say. So AI, machine learning, computer vision, which is completely unheard of for a community that thought that women could only, say, embroider and could sew, and that those would be the traditional livelihoods, if at all. But today, that glass ceiling's been broken. And you have these young women who now have consistent wages, who've grown to becoming team leads and assistant managers with an organization. So it's not just been about a job and 3 months of retention, but it's been a changed lifestyle for these women. Becoming, the primary decision makers at home with respect to finances, learning how to invest their money. So, in terms of understanding what, say, mutual funds are, was something which was, the girls there would never have even dreamt of thinking that they would have a voice to think of how to invest their money. And today, these girls are doing all of that. to the extent that the men have now understood that it's important to have, women educated, women skilled, and women employed. And we have a lot of fathers bringing their daughters to our centers saying that, we'd like a different life for her. And we have daughters bringing their mothers, they want a different life for them. So that's when you know that there's a community transformation. Now there's openness. People want their girls to get educated. Now, how do you quantify a impact like this, right? So in 8 years, the kind of life changes that have happened in the community, that is very, very difficult to quantify. But these are great examples, and these are what sort of keeps us motivated. And when you have a view of, so any program, if you have a long-term view, you actually get to see a lot more with respect to impact. So I think impact is a lot more than some of the usual metrics that we track to determine our success. Though those are necessary and those are the only available points against which you can measure outcome in the short term, but impact is really a long-term phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a very heartwarming example and a story. And I think such stories, when they are shared, that's one way to communicate the impact. As you very rightly said, most of it cannot be measured. And but then if you look at the entire ecosystem and the stakeholders who are there, they are still very particular to see things being quantified, things being presented through various graphs and, various ways of putting up the stats and things like that. So besides all this we discussed just now, Monisha, is there something else you would wish to share with our audience with regard to ROI on skilling?
So one of the common ways in which ROI is, getting measured, and I think there are new models that are coming in with respect to impact bonds, right? And I think that will be a very interesting space to look at, where impact bonds are again looking at short-term outcomes. There's no taking away that. So they're still looking at placements and salaries and all of that. But I think one of the things that's going to be interesting when impact bonds become a more prevalent form of funding for projects is to see how you can adjust your costs. And I think that flexibility is going to be very key. So it's like saying that, those are, you get paid based on milestones, and your milestones could be enrollments or training or certification or placements or whatever. So for every milestone that you accomplish, you get paid. And but you don't have to worry so much about how your costs have or how you've spent your money. So you may have spent more on, say, hiring a better faculty who's also doing mobilization versus looking at, okay, mobilization costs have to be managed within a certain thing, and training costs have to be managed within. So you have a lot more flexibility to play around with your models, with how you choose to do certain things. So you can certainly innovate and experiment a lot more, keeping the goalposts in mind. So I think I'm sure with time, there will be evolution of a lot of this, and these dialogues are very important. These conversations are important because these help us think about what can we do ahead in future. So I'm very excited about even the whole impact bond, which has worked very well for education, to come into skilling now. And we hope that that will open up newer paradigms for skilling funding, perhaps change the way even CSRs currently funding.
Okay. Since you mentioned impact bonds, if somebody is interested to know more, where does one go to find the?
So it's very early stage, and I also have a very limited understanding of it, but I believe NSDC, in partnership with a couple of consultants like MSDF and British Asian Trust, and they're working out these.
Yeah, I think it was in the news few months ago also that something like this is coming up. Maybe it will materialize soon and help many more. Yeah, thank you, Monisha, for this very enlightening talk. I think now we have a clear idea about not only ROI, but for few concerns about sustaining and scaling an enterprise in skilling, either it is CSR driven or through some other means. I'm sure many will benefit from this. Thanks a lot. I look forward to be in touch with you.
Thank you, Madhuri, for inviting me, and it was great chatting up. Thank you very much.
Great.